Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Deen Scope TV. The air was heavy with fear. Across the battlefield, two armies stood facing each other, but no one moved. No swords clashed, no arrows flew. Because this was not a war of armies. It had become a war of courage. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and write in the comments which country you are watching from if you are ready. Let's begin. On one side stood the forces of Jalut, worn, uncertain, and outnumbered. On the other stood a towering figure whose very presence silenced hearts, Jalut. A warrior so massive, so feared, that even seasoned soldiers hesitated to meet his gaze. Day after day he stepped forward, issuing the same challenge: who will face me? And day after day, no one answered. Men who had trained for battle, who had prepared themselves for war, suddenly found their courage fading. It wasn't just his strength, it was what he represented. Fear, doubt, and the feeling that this fight could not be won. Because sometimes the greatest enemy is not the one in front of you, but the belief inside you that you are not enough. Among the ranks of Jalut's army stood someone who didn't seem to belong there. Young, unassuming, not known for strength nor for battle, Dawood. He was not a soldier in the way the others were. He had not built a reputation in war, nor carried the weight of past victories. To many, he was just another face in the crowd, perhaps even less. Someone who should have remained behind, far from the danger of a battlefield like this. And yet, while the strongest men stood silent, something inside him was different. He watched, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. He saw the fear spreading through the army. He saw how a single man had shaken an entire group. But more than that, he saw something else. Something that others had forgotten in that moment. That victory does not come from size. It does not come from strength. It comes from Allah. While others measured Jalut by his height, his armor, his power, Dawood measured the situation differently. He did not see an unbeatable giant. He saw a test, a moment where truth would stand against arrogance, where faith would be weighed against fear. And in that moment the question changed. It was no longer who can defeat him. It became who is willing to trust Allah enough to try. The battlefield was silent, but inside Dawood something was rising. Not pride, not anger, but certainty. A certainty that what matters is not how powerful your enemy appears, but how strong your connection is to the one who controls everything. He stepped forward. At first, it seemed almost unreal. A young figure moving toward the front, breaking the stillness that had held everyone in place. Some must have looked at him with confusion, others perhaps with concern. Because what could someone like him possibly do against someone like Jalut? But Dawood was not stepping forward for himself. He was stepping forward because he believed that no matter how impossible something looks, Allah can change it in a moment. Believed that fear loses its power when your trust is placed in something greater. Believed that even the weakest, in the eyes of people, can become the strongest when supported by Allah. This is what made him different. While others saw the size of the challenge, he saw the size of his Lord. And that difference was about to change everything, because sometimes history does not turn because of the strongest. It turns because of the one who dares to believe when no one else does. And now, as he moved closer to the center of the battlefield, the silence began to shift. The moment that no one expected was about to unfold. The battlefield held its breath. As Dawood stepped forward, the silence that once came from fear now turned into something else. Disbelief. Eyes followed him, some wide with confusion, others with quiet concern. This was not the warrior they expected. This was not the man who would answer Jalut's challenge, and yet he kept walking, steady, unwavering, as if the weight of the moment had no effect on him. Across the field, Jalut noticed a slight movement at first, then a pause. The giant stepped forward, his presence alone enough to shake the ground beneath him. His armor reflected the light, his weapon heavy and unforgiving. He had faced many men before, strong men, trained men, warriors who carried confidence into battle. But this was different. This was a boy. And for a moment even Jalut seemed confused. Then came the reaction that many expected. Mockery. A laugh filled with arrogance, echoing across the battlefield. Because how could this possibly be a threat? How could someone so small stand against someone so powerful? To Jalut, this was not a challenge. It was an insult. But Dawood did not react. He did not allow the noise, the laughter, or the doubt to enter his heart, because his focus was not on Jalut. It was not on the army watching him. It was not on the fear that surrounded the moment. His focus was on Allah. And in that focus, everything else became smaller. He did not carry a sword. He did not wear heavy armor. In his hand was something simple, a sling and a stone. To the eyes of the world it looked insignificant, almost laughable against a giant like Jalut. But Dawood did not see it that way, because he understood something that many forget in moments like this. It is not the weapon that brings victory. It is the one who controls the outcome. As the distance between them closed, the tension grew. Every second felt heavier than the last. The army watched, caught between hope and fear. Some may have already accepted what they thought was inevitable, that this would end quickly and not in their favor. But Dawood's heart remained firm. He knew that this was not just a battle between two individuals. It was a moment of truth, a moment where reliance on Allah would be tested in the clearest way possible. And then he made his intention clear. He faced Jalut not with arrogance, not with pride, but with certainty, a certainty rooted in something deeper than strength. He understood that no matter how powerful Jalut seemed, he was still just a creation, limited, dependent, controlled, while Allah is not. In that realization, fear had no place. Dawood raised the sling. The battlefield seemed to freeze. For a brief moment, everything slowed. The noise faded. The tension reached its peak. And in that silence, there was a truth that only a few could see. This was not about a stone. This was about faith. He released it. A simple motion, quick, almost effortless. But what followed was anything but ordinary. The stone flew with precision, guided not just by skill, but by something far greater. It struck Jalut with a force that no one expected, and in an instant, the giant who had silenced an army fell. Just like that. No long battle, no drawn-out struggle, a single moment, a single strike, and it was over. The same battlefield that once held fear, now held shock. Silence of a different kind, not the silence of hesitation, but the silence of realization. What they had just witnessed was not just a victory, it was a lesson that strength does not come from size, that power does not come from appearance, that what seems impossible to people is nothing in the sight of Allah. Jalut, who once stood as an unstoppable force, now lay defeated, and Dawood, who was once overlooked, underestimated, and unseen, became the one through whom Allah changed the course of history. But this moment was not just about victory, it was about what made that victory possible. Because Dawood did not win because he was stronger. He won because he trusted when others doubted, stepped forward when others held back, believed when no one else did. And that is what turned a simple stone into something that brought down a giant. The battle was over, but something much greater had just begun. The echo of that moment did not fade quickly. What had just happened on the battlefield was not something people could easily forget. A giant had fallen. An army that once stood frozen in fear had witnessed something they could not explain through strength or strategy. And at the center of it all stood Dawood, no longer just a young unknown figure, but someone whose name was now carried in every conversation, every reflection, every pulp that had seen what unfolded. But victory is not where the story ends. In fact, for Dawood, it was only the beginning, because when Allah chooses someone, their journey is not defined by a single moment. It is shaped over time, through responsibility, through trials, and through a role that grows far beyond what people initially see. After the fall of Jalut, the atmosphere changed completely. The same people who once saw Dawood as insignificant now looked at him differently. Respect replaced doubt. Recognition replaced obscurity. But even in that shift, there was something unique about him. He did not change. He did not carry himself with pride. He did not allow the victory to define his worth. Because he understood something that many struggle to understand, that success is not yours to own. It is something granted by Allah, and just as easily, it can be taken away. This is what made him different from the beginning. While others may have been elevated by victory, Dawood remained grounded by his connection to Allah. And it was this balance between strength and humility that prepared him for what was coming next. Because leadership was not far away. Over time, Dawood began to take on greater responsibility, not just as someone who had proven his courage, but as someone whose character reflected something deeper. People did not just trust his strength, they trusted his heart, and that trust matters. Because true leadership is not built on fear, it is built on integrity, on justice, on the ability to stand firm, not only in moments of battle, but in moments where decisions affect the lives of others. Eventually, Dawood was given what few are given: authority, power, and beyond that, prophethood. This was not just a rise in status, it was a transformation of responsibility. Because being a king is one thing, but being a prophet and a king carries a weight that cannot be measured in worldly terms. He was now responsible not only for leading people in their affairs, but for guiding them in their faith. Not only for maintaining order, but for upholding truth. And in a world where power often corrupts, where authority often leads to dhulm, Dawood was given something that set him apart completely: guidance. Divine guidance. This is what ensured that his leadership would not become a source of oppression, but a source of justice. And yet, even as he rose, even as his position became stronger, his foundation remained the same. He never forgot where his strength came from. He never forgot that the victory over Jalut was not his own doing. He never forgot that everything he had was given. And this awareness protected him, because when a person remembers Allah in moments of ease, they are protected from arrogance, they are protected from dhulm, they are protected from becoming lost in the very power they were entrusted with. Dawood's story at this stage becomes something more than just history. It becomes a reflection of what it means to rise without losing yourself, to be given influence without becoming consumed by it, to hold power while remaining a servant of Allah above all else. And this is rare, because many can reach positions of strength, but very few can carry that strength with humility. Very few can remain just when they have the ability to be unjust. Very few can remember Allah when the world begins to praise them. This is what made Dawood not just a leader, but a chosen one, because his journey was not about becoming powerful. It was about becoming worthy of the responsibility that power brings. And as his role expanded, as his influence grew, the true test of his character was no longer on the battlefield. It was in how he would rule, how he would judge, how he would balance the weight of this world with the accountability of the next. Because being given power is not the end of a test. It is the beginning of a greater one. And for Dawood, that test was about to reveal something even more extraordinary. Power is a test few truly understand. It appears as an honor, a reward, a position of control and influence. But in reality, it carries a weight that can either elevate a person or destroy them. Because when someone is given authority, they are not just given the ability to lead. They are given the ability to choose, to decide what is right, what is wrong, who is given justice and who is denied it. And on the day of judgment, those choices will not be forgotten. Dawood alayhi salam was not just a king who ruled over land and people. He was a prophet entrusted with divine guidance, and this combination made his responsibility far greater than that of any ordinary ruler, because his judgments were not meant to follow personal desire, nor the pressure of people, nor the influence of power. They were meant to reflect truth, absolute truth, the kind of truth that does not change depending on circumstances, the kind of truth that stands firm even when it is difficult, even when it goes against what others expect. This is what made Dawood's rule unique. He did not judge based on status. He did not favor the strong over the weak. He did not allow power to cloud his sense of justice, because he understood that every decision he made was not just seen by people, it was seen by Allah. There is a well-known moment in his life that reveals the depth of this responsibility, a moment where two individuals came to him seeking judgment. Their case seemed simple at first, but within it was a test, not of knowledge, but of awareness. A reminder that even the most righteous can be tested and that justice requires more than quick decisions. Because justice is not just about reaching a conclusion, it is about ensuring that the conclusion is haqq. And to reach truth, a person must listen carefully, reflect deeply, and remain aware that even a small mistake can carry weight. This is the standard Dawood alayhi salam held himself to, not perfection in the sense of never being tested, but sincerity in always returning to what is right. Because a true leader is not someone who never faces difficulty in judgment. A true leader is someone who remains humble enough to recognize it and strong enough to correct it. And that humility is what protected him. While many rulers become hardened by authority, Dawood remained soft where it mattered most, in his heart. He did not allow power to make him distant from Allah. He did not allow his position to make him forget his purpose. Instead, he carried his responsibility with awareness. An awareness that every hukm, every decision, every action was part of a larger accountability. And this awareness shaped the way he ruled. He established justice not as a concept but as a living reality. People felt it, they experienced it. They knew that under his leadership, their rights would not be ignored, their voices would not be silenced, and their zulm would not go unanswered. This is what true justice looks like, not just laws, but fairness that reaches the hearts of people. And yet, despite all of this, despite the authority, the respect, the power, Dawood never saw himself as above others. He saw himself as responsible for them. This is the difference, because when a person sees power as a privilege, they begin to use it for themselves. But when they see it as a responsibility, they use it for others. And Dawood alayhi salam understood this deeply. He knew that leadership was not about control. It was about service, not about being elevated above people, but about being accountable for them. And in this balance between strength and humility, between authority and servitude, his character reached a level that few ever reach. Because maintaining justice in a position of power is one of the greatest challenges a person can face. It requires constant awareness, constant sincerity, constant remembrance of Allah. Without that, power becomes dangerous. With it, power becomes a means of righteousness. And Dawood alayhi salam stood firmly on that path, not because he was free from tests, but because he remained connected to the one who guided him through them. And yet, even with all his strength as a leader, all his wisdom in judgment, there was another side of him that defined him even more deeply, a side that had nothing to do with ruling, nothing to do with authority, a side that revealed who he truly was when he stood alone, away from the eyes of people. Because beyond the king, beyond the warrior, beyond the judge, there was a servant. And that is where his story becomes even more powerful. When the day ended and the responsibilities of leadership were set aside, Dawood alayhi salam returned to a place where titles no longer mattered. There were no crowds, no judgments to make, no authority to carry, just silence and a heart that turned completely toward Allah. This was the side of him that many did not see, not the warrior, not the king, but the servant. Because true greatness is not only shown in how a person leads others, it is revealed in how they stand before their Lord when no one else is watching. Dawood alayhi salam did not allow his position to distance him from Abad. In fact, it brought him closer. The more responsibility he carried in this world, the more he understood his need for connection with Allah. And so, he dedicated himself to worship in a way that was unmatched. He would divide his time with precision and sincerity. It is reported that the most beloved prayer to Allah was the prayer of Dawood. He would sleep for half the night, stand in prayer for a third of it, and then rest again. This balance was not random. It reflected discipline, awareness, and a deep understanding of what the soul needs. Because ibadat is not just about quantity, it is about consistency, it is about sincerity, it is about standing before Allah not out of obligation alone, but out of love. And Dawood alayhi salam embodied that love. When he recited, his voice carried something beyond sound. It carried presence. It carried sincerity so deep that even creation responded to it. The mountains echoed his praise. The birds gathered and joined him in glorifying Allah. Imagine that moment, a human voice filled with devotion, so pure that the world around him responded. This was not just a miracle, it was a reflection of his heart. Because when the heart is truly connected to Allah, its athar extends beyond what we can see. It influences the environment. It carries a weight that cannot be measured in physical terms. And in the case of Dawood alayhi salam, that connection became something that even the natural world recognized. But this level of closeness did not come without effort. It came through struggle, through consistency, through choosing to stand in the night while others slept, through remembering Allah when others forgot, through maintaining sincerity when the world offered distraction. And perhaps this is what makes his story so powerful. He was not someone removed from responsibility. He was not someone living in isolation. He was a king, a leader, a judge. And yet, despite all of that, he never allowed those roles to take over his heart. Instead, he protected it, because he knew that if the heart remains connected, everything else falls into place. But if the heart becomes distant, nothing else truly matters. This is a lesson that reaches beyond his time, because today, many people struggle to find balance. They are busy, overwhelmed, constantly moving from one responsibility to another. And in that movement, ibadat becomes something that is delayed, shortened, or even neglected, not out of rejection but out of distraction. And that is where the difference lies. Dawood alayhi salam was not free from responsibility, but he prioritized his connection with Allah above all of it. And that priority shaped his entire life. It gave him strength when he needed it, clarity when decisions were difficult, humility when power could have changed him, and peace, even in the midst of responsibility. Because true peace does not come from having control over your life. It comes from knowing who is in control. And Dawood alayhi salam lived with that awareness constantly. His worship was not separate from his life. It was the foundation of it. And this is why when we look at him, we do not just see a warrior who defeated a giant. We see a heart that defeated something far greater, the pull of dunya, the distraction of power, the illusion of self-sufficiency. And in overcoming that, he reached a level that few ever reach, a level where strength and humility exist together, where leadership and servitude are not opposites but connected, where a person stands strong in front of people and completely humble before Allah. And that is what truly defines him. Not just what he did, but who he was when he stood alone in the night. And as his life continued, as his journey moved toward its final stages, what remained was not just his achievements, but the legacy of a heart that never lost its connection. A legacy that still speaks, even today. When we look back at the life of Dawood alayhi salam, it is easy to focus on the moments that stand out: the fall of Jalut, the rise to kingship, the power, the miracles. These are the events that capture attention, the parts of the story that feel larger than life. But if you look deeper beyond the surface, you begin to realize that his story is not just about what he achieved, it is about what he represented. Because in a world where strength is often misunderstood, Dawood alayhi salam redefined it. He showed that strength is not in size, not in weapons, not in status, but in faith. The moment he stepped forward to face Jalut, he was not the strongest on the battlefield. He was not the most experienced. By every worldly measure, he was the least likely to succeed. And yet he became the one through whom Allah brought victory. Why? Because he relied on Allah when others relied on themselves. This is the first lesson, that true strength begins where self-reliance ends. And this lesson does not belong only to the past. It speaks directly to the present, because every person faces their own version of Jalut, not always in the form of a physical enemy, but in the form of challenges that feel overwhelming, fears that seem too big, situations that feel impossible to overcome. And in those moments, the question becomes the same. Do you see the size of the problem, or do you see the power of Allah? Dawood alayhi salam chose the second, and that choice changed everything. But his story does not stop at victory, because many people can succeed once. Few can remain grounded after success. And this is where the second lesson emerges: humility. After defeating Jalut, Dawood alayhi salam could have allowed that moment to define him. He could have embraced the praise, the recognition, the status that came with it. But he didn't. He remained the same servant of Allah he was before the victory, because he understood that success is not something you own. It is something you are entrusted with, and how you carry that trust defines who you are. This is a lesson that becomes even more important in a world where recognition is often chased, where people measure their worth by how others see them. Dawood alayhi salam shows that true value is not found in the eyes of people, but in the sight of Allah. And then comes the third lesson: balance. Because Dawood alayhi salam was not only a warrior, he was not only a king, he was not only a prophet. He was all of these things at once, and yet he maintained balance between them. He ruled with justice, he lived with humility, he worshipped with sincerity. He did not allow one role to consume the others. He did not let power distance him from Abed. He did not let responsibility disconnect him from reflection. Instead, he built his life around a center that remained constant, his connection with Allah. And that connection gave him stability. Because when a person is connected to Allah, they are not easily shaken by success or failure. They are not defined by what they gain or lose. They remain steady because their foundation is not built on the temporary. It is built on the eternal. And finally, there is a lesson that ties everything together: accountability. Because no matter how strong, how successful, how respected a person becomes, they will return to Allah. They will stand before Him, and everything they were given will be questioned. Dawood alayhi salam lived with this awareness. It shaped his decisions, it guided his leadership, it kept his heart soft, and it reminded him that this life, no matter how powerful it appears, is temporary. This is perhaps the most important lesson of all. Because we live in a time where it is easy to become distracted by the surface of things, to focus on what is visible, what is immediate, what is temporary. But Dawood's story pulls us back to something deeper, to purpose, to meaning, to the reality that what truly matters is not what you achieve in this world, but how you stand before Allah when it ends. And so, his legacy is not just a story to admire, it is a mirror, a reflection of what is possible when strength is guided by faith, when power is balanced with humility, and when a heart remains connected to its Creator. Because in the end, the greatest victory is not defeating a giant. It is defeating everything that distances you from Allah. And that is a battle every single one of us is still fighting. The question is, how will you fight yours? Subscribe to the channel now, so you do not miss the upcoming videos. We ask for your du'as, as we are going through difficult days. We especially need your prayers, so that these videos can continue. See you in the next video. May Allah be pleased with you all.